Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Loving this. You know, I was just saying I haven't had the pleasure of interviewing two people before at the same time, but that made for a much better dance party too. Gosh, we have to do this, right? We have to do this more often. Risers and Thrivers, welcome back. I don't know if you were just here for our last recording that just ended minutes ago, but gosh, that was super, super powerful. We talked with Andrew Petty, really inspirational, all about how he has transformed his lifelong anxiety and fear of mortality into motivation to live his best life today, and how he now inspires others to do so as well and to live their best life with guts and gusto, as he describes it. And it was just a really powerful show. He and I connected on a lot of different facets, and it was a really great show. I would really recommend listening to that one if you missed it. And today, wow, it's a really big honor to have William and Gabe here with us, who have both faced really trying losses of losing a child. And inspirationally and incredibly, after navigating all that they now collectively serve to support and encourage other young fathers who have faced a loss. And they do so through different platforms, but especially through their podcast, Lost Boys to Found Fathers. This is going to be a really emotional show today. Really want to open up the conversation behind men's mental health and what parents go through, in particular, what fathers go through in this most difficult of difficult times. William and Gabriel, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's an honor to meet with you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being with us today. So let's start with Gabe. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal story and why you're here with us today?
Sure, absolutely. So my wife and I were married at 23 years old, and after a few years of marriage, decided to try to get pregnant, and we had a hard time. It just wasn't going as planned and taking longer than we thought. Ended up going the fertility doctor route, which was honestly it was really hard for me as a chiropractor because I'm all about natural everything. But here,
we have to pause. I forgot, audience. Like, I've never interviewed another fellow chiropractor before. Yes. Gabriel is another chiropractor. I'm super excited. 2 chiros on the show today. Loving this.
That is awesome. That's right. It's cool to be on with another DC. So yeah. So you know how that is, and we try to do everything as natural as possible, and so I was kind of going against the grain for myself, I thought, and we ended up thankfully getting pregnant through that. The first medication that my wife ended up taking, they told us there was a less than 1% chance of her having a multiple birth or a multiple pregnancy, I would say, and we were blessed with triplets.
Wow.
The first month, and things were going well. The doctors obviously had a strong eye on her because of her small frame and her carrying 3 babies. They said, if we could get you to 32 weeks, that'd be great. Unfortunately, she went into preterm labor at 24 and a half weeks and delivered our daughters just a few days after being in the hospital, trying to stop that preterm labor. Reese, Vivian, and Sophia were their names. One daughter.
What were the names again?
Reese, Vivian, and Sophia.
Beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much. And unfortunately, little Reese only lived 1 day. Vivian only lived 3 weeks, and Sophia ended up living 3 months. So we thought she was going to make it out of the NICU, but unfortunately, she had some infections that set in and just took her out. And so, within 3.5 months, my wife courageously delivered 3 babies and then buried 3 babies, and that was a really tough time. So that's kind of what got us here. In that through that time period, I ended up journaling a good bit just to try to deal with my own emotions and what I was, facing. Eventually turned that into a book 7 years later. And because of that, I guess, support and ministry that I kind of developed, that's how Will and I ended up connecting several years later. So that's my story. My wife's
Did William, did you reach out to him after reading that book?
He actually reached out to me. We go to the same church.
I
And
see.
he kind of made himself available to me, and we connected in the
Beautiful.
weeks and months after we lost our son.
Gabriel, how long had it been since you lost your beautiful triplets to when you wrote your book?
Yeah, so it was 7 years till we got that published and put out there. I just worked on it. I'd work on it a little bit, put it down, work on it, put it down. And then, so yeah, 7 years later, we got it out.
So let's open this up a little bit more. So your wife goes into labor at 24 weeks, you said. What did you feel when you got that call?
Oh, it was insane. You know, we had, I was at work, and she, the night before, she had been feeling a little pressure, as she described it. And man, we didn't know this was our first pregnancy. We didn't know what
And
to
triplets, I would assume a lot of pressure.
Right, absolutely.
Yes.
And so we were like, okay. And so the next day I get up and go to work. She's doing fine. And she just said she felt not right, is all she could say. So she just went to get checked out. And so, you know, she calls me, and she's bawling, hysterically crying. And I obviously knew something was wrong. So I just, you know, immediately just left the office and told my staff to handle it. Thankfully, I had an associate there that could see the rest of the patients. And you know, met her at the OB's office to take her to the hospital.
And then after they were born, you said Reese had only lived for 1 day. And how did you feel at that point? You've lost one at this point.
It was surreal. It was like you're in just the worst dream that you could imagine.
And was it disbelief? Like when they were born, you thought that they would be okay still, even though they were so tiny?
Absolutely. I mean, I guess the eternal optimist, you know, for me, I was just like, you know what, this is going to turn out amazingly well. I just knew that we were going to be the couple that had the triplets that were born super early, but that could then tell the story about how they made it through. And they, you know, we were there a few months and we got out, and I never, ever thought that they were going to pass. And so when Reese died, it was a complete shock to my system and to my faith, because
of course
I just really thought that, you know, it was almost like if this, then this, and I felt like that's what we were going to get. And so it was an emotional, physical, and spiritual, you know, blow to the chest. So
of course, I can't even imagine. It must have challenged your faith on every level.
Mm-hmm.
And then how, like, did you find yourself after that distant from connecting with your other two, or was that just not a concern and you were fully immersed? How did you overcome? Because you have two other babies and you've just lost one. I can't even imagine everything you were going through. Yeah,
super awesome question. So actually having those two girls still there was very helpful for us, I think, initially, because it was like, okay, we have to be there for these other two girls, right? Yeah. So like, there's no time to wallow in self-pity or doubt or discouragement or whatever.
Gave you purpose.
That's right. You had that purpose. You had to get up and you had to keep going. Now, that means that 3.5 months later, then we start processing all the emotions that you couldn't have initially, right?
Of course.
And you have to take time to work through that. And it took us a while to do that. And honestly, I probably still work through some of those 17 years later.
Of course. Just you had to be on survival mode.
Yes.
And so that doesn't allow time, right? We bury those emotions and we have nothing else to do because it is survival mode. Yes, our bodies go into this state to protect us and to protect those that we need to care for. And that's how we get through those brutal times. But you're right. Unless we really create that safe space within ourselves in a short time frame after that survival mode dissipates, to feel all those emotions that we buried up. That's right. Those emotions can eat us alive unless we do that. They don't go anywhere, you know. They don't just get released. Like, I believe that they get transformed, you know, to mental health issues, to physical health issues, to other things that are very debilitating, right? Unless we create that safe space. And a lot of people just shift to autopilot after, right? And they just stay, go, go, go. Well, that happened. I'm okay, right? But they're not okay. And a lot of people don't really digest this. And this is why I admire so much about what you do. William, can you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah. my story starts out pretty similar to Gabe and his wife Ryan's. My wife's name's Hannah. We got married at 25, and we did the same thing. We were married a few years. We wanted to have a child and tried for a while, probably tried for a year and a half. Wasn't working. So we went the same infertility route, or the fertility clinic route. I'm not a chiropractor, but I kind of had the same feelings as Gabe did, that I wanted to do things as naturally as possible. My wife wanted to do a home birth. So kind of doing the fertility clinic route was, again, outside of what we had hoped for, and really just kind of came to that was the only option. So we did it. And so we went through with that. After a few tries, I think the third month, she got pregnant. Everything was fine. We had a midwife. She came and she checked up on us probably more than she would have gone to the OB, and everything was completely fine all the way up. His due date was September 30th, 2019, and that was a Monday. The Thursday prior, she had her last checkup, and everything was fine. Heartbeat was perfect. Position, everything was completely fine. That next day on Friday, my wife didn't feel our son move a whole lot. At that point, she's 39 and a half weeks, and she was feeling him, do flips and kick and everything. And she didn't feel him move a whole lot, but I guess she didn't say anything to me about it. She just kind of convinced herself that everything was fine. That night, laying in bed, she said she didn't feel him. I'm a really heavy sleeper. She said she got up and she went in the other room and she was doing jumping jacks, and she laid down with her belly on the bathroom tile to see if it was cold, and it would shock him and wake him up.
It's almost like she intuitively knew.
Yeah, and she knew something was going on, so she did all this stuff. She drank orange juice to try to give a shock to sugar, and she said she convinced herself that she felt him move, and she was okay to go to sleep. So the next day was a Saturday, and she went through the whole day, didn't feel him move. Again, I guess she knew something was wrong, but she didn't want to, I guess, admit it and let it be true. And also,
it's really hard too, because when you're pregnant, there's so many symptoms, that you go through, and you're like, oh, it's just part of pregnancy. There's so much. They're quiet for a bit, they move for a bit, and you don't want to be easily alarmed. You don't want to overreact, right? So I can totally see that.
And it was, our first pregnancy as well. And so all those questions were there, is this normal? Is it not? So about 8:00 on that Saturday night, I was on the couch watching TV, and she came in and she was crying, and she said, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on, but we need to call a midwife. And she came over. She lives close by. She came over, and she was checking with the little Doppler to try to get a heartbeat, and she couldn't. And it was just kind of, it may have been 40 seconds, but it felt like it was 40 minutes just sitting there waiting to listen. And she didn't say anything was wrong. She just said, we need to go to the hospital. So we got to the hospital. A doctor that, the things that stick in your mind, a doctor looked like he was 5 or 10 years past retiring, checked with his ultrasound, and he just turned to us and said, I'm sorry, there's no aortic activity. And I'm sorry. And just kind of turned around and walked out of the room. And we were like, okay, what does that mean? And one of the nurses is like, I'm sorry, your son is dead.
Just as abrupt as that.
So, yeah. And it's one of the nurses, and the midwife was there with us. I had called or I think texted my parents, which live in town, but they hadn't got there. So we just sat there and cried. And my wife was just devastated. I was in shock and I don't think I even cried or could process what was going on. And they kind of gave us a few minutes, and then they just said, all right, we need to decide what we're doing. We're going to move you to a labor and delivery room, give you a chance to decide, when you want to do the C-section and all that. And my wife was adamant, she wanted to do the natural birth at home. And she said, I'm not going to do a C-section. She wanted to, honor our son and deliver him naturally. And that's just, the way she thought at the time. So
I love that she stuck to her ground.
Yeah. And that's what she wanted to do. So we kind of started that route. We took, all the medication that induced labor, and she labored for probably, let me see here, probably about like 48, 49, 50 hours, and delivered him on Monday night. And that was his due date. Was delivered September 30th, 2019. And like Gabe said, all the way up until the end, I was just thinking like, this isn't going to happen to us. Like this is bad, but I'm sure, they just made a mistake. Gabe and I are both Christians. And so, I was just praying the whole time, like, Lord, you can make this not be what the doctor said. You can heal. This, just can't be real. So it wouldn't happen to us. And so our son was born, and he was stillborn. And I didn't mention earlier, but our son's name was Gabriel. And my name's William Gregory Heacox. He was William Gabriel Heacox. We're going to call him Gabriel. So,
but this wasn't in honor of the Gabriel beside you.
I didn't even know him.
Point. Well, that's a crazy coincidence, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's like you two need to be connected on lots of different layers right there. Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, and so how did you cope with this, William?
There's a much longer story that we don't have time to share on this podcast, but I had been in a really bad place before my wife was pregnant, and kind of through some rough circumstances got back where I needed to be. And really, in the hospital, the way I dealt with it was the same thing Gabe said. I didn't, I was in survival mode. My wife was in pain, and I was just trying to help, do anything I could, hold her hand, pray for her, kind of like ward off people that had come to see us, and really just kind of like be the shield and keep them outside the room and go talk to them and say, thanks for coming. And then, let her be in there and process. Afterwards, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of part of our whole thing doing the podcast is, the husband has a different experience than the wife because he doesn't feel the child inside of him. He doesn't have the same relationship that the wife does, that the mother does. And so I think what I lost, was like the hopes and the dreams and the expectations I had of a little boy, running around with me. Well, I was, wasn't a father before. So I kind of pictured, that 2 or 3 year old running around in the yard with a little hammer, tapping nails in. And so I lost those hopes. And I think
you planned for it all that time. You saw it happening. Like you adjusted and adapted your life to welcoming this beautiful child. Of course. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I think to directly answer your question, the only way, when I was, this is part of our, our testimony of our podcast. When I was in college, I drank a whole lot, and I smoked a lot of marijuana. I did a lot of things I shouldn't have done, and, went down some rough paths. And had I not been in the place spiritually that I was when our son was born, that's what I would have gone back to, is heavy drinking, heavy drug use.
Those unhealthy coping
wasn't that way. Yeah. All those unhealthy coping mechanisms I know our marriage would have fallen apart, and, my life would look totally different. So my faith in the Lord was, what carried me through was just to have the confidence that even though I didn't understand what happened, our son was created for a reason. His life mattered, and, his life would bring something good. The Bible says, that God uses all things for the good, and that he will be glorified. And so, our son's life wasn't meaningless. It wasn't just a coincidence. And, even though I can't point to one thing and say, this is the reason he was alive, or, this is the good, I can trust that God had a plan. And, if I don't put my trust in him, where can I put it? So that's really, what got me through. And then kind of bringing it all back around to where we left Gabe's. We had just joined our church, I think 2 weeks before our son was born, and we were going to be introduced. We have a pretty large church. We were going to be introduced on the stage as new members, I guess, the day before he was born. So we pushed it to the next week, and they introduced us, and we asked them to say, this is Will and Hannah, and they have a son in heaven named Gabriel. And because of that, there were 2 or 3 guys that introduced themselves to us afterwards and just kind of said, none of them were pushy. They just said, hey, we understand, we've been through something similar and we're available. And so I reached out to those guys, and Gabe was one of them. All of them had great things to say and were very encouraging, but Gabe was the one that stayed in touch with me over the long haul. If it was a call or if it was just a text once a week, or once every other week, it's just whenever. I always knew that, he understood, he was there for me. He'd walk down that same road, and that if I needed to call him when I was mad and didn't understand, or if I just needed somebody to encourage me, or, if I needed, whatever, just somebody to go hang out with, that he was there. And so that's kind of where our friendship grew. And knowing that I wasn't in it alone, I think was really helpful as well.
That someone else had been through it and understood your pain. Mm-hmm. I have a couple of questions, but, I really want to honor Reese and Vivian and Sophia and Gabriel. And you're right, their lives were absolutely not meaningless and have so much purpose. And they've also redirected your purpose, right, into helping others. And before we get into that, I have a big question that I want to talk about. It seems like you're both very protective of your wives, which is very common, right? And did you find in your efforts, like you said, you were shielding her so she could process, right, William? Did you find in your efforts to do so and to support your beautiful wives, given all that they were going through, not just emotionally, but physically, right, after deliveries, etc., did you find that there was support for you as fathers? And you can both answer respectfully, but individually.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess it depends on what you mean by support. If there were people there that were available to talk, then I think yes. I'm not gonna speak for Gabe, but I think for me, I felt like I said, those guys reached out to us, said, hey, I'm here for you. And, you got people say, I'm praying for you, I'm here for you, and all that. As far as, anything beyond that, like, one person to put his hand on your shoulder, and other than these 2 or 3 guys, someone to actually interact with, it really felt like, I don't know, where can I go? What kind of answers are there out there? And that's, I'll cut it short so Gabe can answer, but that's really where the genesis of our podcast started. Was I was sitting in the hospital in the 2-3 days while my wife was laboring. And when she was sleeping, I was looking for a podcast. I was looking for like a Bible reading plan or a book by a father who lost a child for a father who lost a child. Couldn't find anything. Listened to some by mothers, and it was good, but didn't apply. And it was weird to listen on that side. So
that's exactly why I asked.
Yeah.
Because when I did my research before the show, I couldn't even find anything really aside from what you guys are doing. It was all mom groups, right? Who have lost a child. And of course, powerful. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't address what the fathers are going through, right? And the men's mental health. And no one's really opening up that conversation. And without opening up that conversation, it gets dismissed and people go on autopilot and people live with this terrible pain, and that becomes the trauma. And when you open it up and talk about it, right, we can alleviate some of that. And so I really admire you both. Gabe, what did you find for support for yourself?
Yeah, so my wife and I got closer, which was super helpful. And I had one dude, a friend of mine at church, that was actually one of the pastors on staff there. And he had not experienced anything like this before, but he just knew that I needed to talk and I didn't want to. Because like you said, guys, we have this thing where we just want to clam up and not share our emotions, and we all want to be John Wayne and, that kind of thing, right?
It's okay.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And, and that was me. And so, but this dude his name's Kevin Harris, and I appreciate him so much to this day. And he would make me go to lunch with him every Wednesday, and we would go down to this wings place and sit there, and he would just look at me until I started talking, and I hated it, but at the same time, like, I know how therapeutic that was for me and how much that helped me. And so I'm just so grateful that he made me do that. I tell this story in our book about this girl that was a massage therapist in the hospital, and she came to my wife's room after she had delivered, and she heard this was like the day after Reese had passed or something. And they had sent the massage therapist around to like the massage the mama's feet, and the legs, right. After the birth of the fluid and whatnot. And she said, she's like, look, I don't want to overstep my bounds. She's like, but I heard what happened to y'all, what y'all are facing. And she was like, I just want to tell you that I faced a similar situation a few years ago with twins. And she said, you have to talk to one another. You have to open up to her. She looked at me and she's like, you have to communicate with her. She's like, do not try to do the guy thing and not talk and let your emotions out. She was like, be there for her, communicate with her, talk to her, let her talk to you. And she said, because me and my husband did not do that and our marriage did not make it. And, that was just a real eye opener for me, because I could already feel myself just like withdrawing and not wanting to, to feel, just to push it all down and just push through. And her saying that to me, and then my buddy, making me go talk to him, were great. And honestly, I think that kind of birthed the ability for me to write the emotions that I wrote in the book, to get them out. So you do get a glimpse of what a dad feels, certainly as much as I could what a mom feels as well. But I don't know what she's feeling.
Powerful. It's like you were sent these angels on your path, at the right time and the right place for both of you. It's really interesting hearing those individual stories of how that unfolded. And excuse me, I too have grown up as a girl of faith, strong roots of faith, and then when all this happened, I was like, gosh, what did I do so wrong? And I too felt my faith being really challenged. And, but over time, like I grew up in a Christian church, in the United Church, and our minister, Reverend Posno, would always end service with this Irish benediction. May the rose rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rain fall softly upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you forever in the hollow of his hand. And all I can say is I just felt held on this journey. Like I felt like I was held somehow. That's all I can say. Amidst all of this struggle and turbulence and tribulation, I just felt held. That's all I can say. No matter what was lying ahead tomorrow, I felt held. And I still feel that today. And for me, that's what renewed my faith. But we can be challenged, but we have to hold on to that, right? And that there is purpose and there is meaning. And we find these beautiful silver linings that do come out of the darkness. And we have to be looking for those moments. And so tell me now, you've collaborated and you're now doing this podcast. Please tell me all about it.
Yeah. So Will came to me, after we had been meeting for a little bit, and he was like, hey man, we need to do a support group for guys that are going through this, because we need it. There needs to be stuff out there for men. And the reason he couldn't find any material when he was in the hospital is because I'm the world's worst. I have no idea what I'm doing as far as marketing my book or how to advertise it properly. So that's why he couldn't find it. So that being said, he was like, we got to do something. We got to get the word out there. We got to help guys that are going through this because of what we've been through and what we've taught and, where we are from where we were. And so that was during COVID. And so we were like, well, maybe guys aren't going to come meet in a support group because nobody's within, so many feet of each other right now. And so then we just kind of had the idea, well, let's do a podcast. Hopefully we can reach people that are, in Canada or Singapore or wherever, and not just in our small town here in South Carolina. And so that's how that came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's a verse in the Bible that says that the Lord he's the God of all comfort, and that he comforts us so that we can comfort others with that same comfort that we've been given. And, that's true of our story, that Gabe had people around him when when you lost your girls, I was in high school. And so we didn't know each other. Our paths hadn't even come close to crossing. And the people that God put around Gabe when he and his wife lost their girls provided him with the ability to grow in his relationship to the Lord and deal with his emotions and deal with the pain and grief, so that when I came along 14 years later, having lost my son, he had that comfort inside him that he could give to me, and I needed it. And, without that, without his relationship, without the comfort that the Lord gave to me through him, I wouldn't be here today. And so that's kind of the whole idea of the podcast, and kind of the verse that we use to base, the purpose of the podcast, that, we want to do the same thing for other guys. And there's some guys here in town that I'm talking to, and I'm sure there's some guys that Gabe is talking to personally, and continuing to do the same thing that he did for me. But just like Gabe said, we want to take this to the larger scale, and we still want to, start local and build out from there. But we are hoping that we can, share the truth, the encouragement, the hope, and the comfort that we were given by God with other men. And, the ultimate goal, we say at the end of every podcast, that, we want to encourage guys and help them become better husbands, better fathers, and just better men overall through the truth and the comfort.
Well, through your service and contribution, you're such incredible role models, and on our path to thriving through no matter what adversity we face, we all need to have inspirational role models for others who have surmounted that same climb that we have to climb, right? And so you're standing on top of the hill, but you're, extending your hand back to people that are still climbing that hill, and you're helping them up. And I just think you're incredible. For everyone listening, whatever you're struggling with, seek out, literally actively seek out those inspirational role models, and be empowered. If there's no inspirational role models in the area that you're struggling, do what William and Gabe have done and start that, because people need this. Now, Will and Gabe, what can I do to help? I'm here in Vancouver, Canada. I can spread your mission however possible. I'm like your biggest advocate and your biggest fan. I think what you're doing is excellent, just opening up that conversation about men's mental health, and happy to help in any ways I can. To my audience, can you please share how they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, that's what you can do, is just help us and share us to reach more people. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find us at Lost Boys to Found Fathers. Instagram probably be the easiest. That's the one that I kind of use. I'm the quote social media manager, which you need the air quotes, because it's not my capabilities or my skills. But yeah, so I'm coming out of that with announcements for new episodes and things like that. We are on Podbean, we're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Gabe's getting us on YouTube. We are recording as of like the past 15 episodes or something. We got a camera and we're recording and going on YouTube. So we're trying to make ourselves available in whatever ways we can. But yeah, that's where you can find us, is just search Lost Boys to Found Fathers. From what research I've done, you can find us from that.
Okay, perfect. Now my eyes are terrible. I admit I've lost the vision in my right eye, and the left eye is not the best on the best of days, just because of all the meds I've been through. But now tell me, William, I don't know how you see in the background, I sure love sunflowers. They make me happy. Are these sunflowers on your shirt? And please don't be insulted if they're not, because my eyes are really bad.
No, they're not, but I've been checking that out the whole podcast. They look really close. It's like the Aztec design or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now
I've been checking that out the whole podcast. It like this looks just like that. And yeah.
See, again,
I'm vibing with you. We're doing the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like you and Gabe were meant to meet, and I think all three of us were meant to be here with our like theme.
That's right.
Yellow and brown.
One other thing before we go, I'm going to jump in here and promote some of Gabe's books.
Please do.
This is one, you may not be able to see the subtitle there. It's Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. And his other one is the one that one's new. You just put that out last year.
Yeah.
And this is the one about his girls, and Thy Will Be Done. And what is the subtitle?
Trusting God in the midst of suffering, pain, or loss.
Yeah. And
Beautiful.
So they're both great. My copy, when I read books, I highlight, but I put sticky notes in them. And my copy has like 80 sticky notes in it of things that meant something to me, that were encouraging, that I went through. And So I definitely recommend Gabe's books. I can't
And
say
Gabe,
I'm the author yet, but I do
Gabe,
have a
that's
manuscript I'm working towards finishing too.
I love that. Gabe, that's where you shared a lot of your journal notes too about the raw emotions you were going through, right? And
Yes.
tell me what were some of the tools aside from, talk therapy with these people that really reached out? What were, let's say for each of you, give me 3 tools that somebody listening today, going through similar circumstances, could employ to really best navigate through this dire circumstance and how they could find light through the dark. Gabe, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it was pray, read the Bible, journal. Like
Okay.
those were the things right there that meant the most to me.
And what kind of things would you journal before we actually get the book? Tell me a little bit.
Yeah. I would just try to write down whatever was going on at that time period, but also what I was feeling, right? The emotions that I had, the questions I had for God, because I was having a lot. And so though, and I think that's okay. Like it's okay to question what you believe, because if you're doing it with a sincere heart, then your answers are going to come back and your faith will be refined instead of destroyed. And so at least that was the case for me. That's what I found, and so those are the things that I would write down, hey, I used to believe this. Do I still believe this? And then why or why not?
I think without doing it, that anger would have eaten you alive.
Great point. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I think, I'd echo some of what Gabe said. We're believers, so we think that's really the only healthy way to deal with, some sort of grief or emotional trauma like that, is to come to faith in the Lord and deal with it that way. So yeah, read the Bible, pray. I would say just a practical thing, while hopefully you're reading the Bible and you're trying to learn about the Lord, just take time to live in the moment and to feel your pain. Like there's a difference between, feeling pain and being in the moment and understanding who you are and what you feel and being stuck in it. You can grieve in an unhealthy way where you can't move forward and you're just stuck same day, same feelings every single day. And it's not healthy. You can't move forward. But I think on the other side, what men are probably more prone stereotypically to doing is you spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at home with your wife, then you go back to work and you just act like you didn't even have a son or a daughter. You just get right back to it. And so I think the practical advice, whether it's, dealing with, divorce or cancer or any sort of loss, I would say, take time to process your emotions, because if you just bottle it all up, it's not going to be healthy for you or for anybody around you.
I think that's huge. Like just sitting with the pain, and not trying to run with it, and just that level of acceptance, and that self-compassion that we can all find just by sitting with it. I was just talking on the last show about, I would talk to it. I would literally talk to my pain. I would talk to myself. Okay, Janie, this is okay. My middle name is Jane. Talk to it. And for me, music was really incredibly helpful, because music is one powerful force, right? Because even when we feel so alone, when you couldn't find those inspirational role models, right? Music, no matter what our story, connects us to the pain that others experience, even if it's not the same story. And we feel connected. We feel that sense of bond. We don't feel as alone when we hear our pain through the lyrics of others. And so I would find music to be really helpful as well. I would actually make my sad music playlist, right? Just to sit in it, and then I would shift from that. So if it was and it's all ups and downs, right? We're never, and I'm sure you experience this still today, right? Where it's still oh my gosh, just overwhelmed with grief still at times, right? And for me, I still experience these, I call them my gratitude attacks, but they're definite moments of post-traumatic stress where I'll wake up in the middle of the night in my cozy bedroom here with my kids sleeping down the hall, and I'm in a complete panic. I wake up startled, completely sitting erect. I'm in this complete sweat. I'm panting. I'm like patting myself, trying to feel for all the tubes that once came out of me. I feel for the handcuffs that once held me captive. I can hear the noises from down the hall, like it doesn't go away, but it's how we navigate, how we use those tools, and for me, it's less and less, but I've come to refer to those moments because I then kind of slowly realize I don't see the white walls of my hospital. I then start to see the brightly colored purple walls that I painted my bedroom for a stark contrast from these white walls. When we divorced, I was like, I'm just going to do purple. And then I start to see the purple, right? And I start to come out of that, but there's no like end point, it's all this linear progress and developing these healthy coping mechanisms, these support circles, journaling, going through, sitting with that pain, these music playlists, whatever it may be. There are so many tools, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, if you want to practice, your fitness, just run and, whatever resonates with you. There are so many tools out there, but be active in your recovery, have an active role in your recovery, take those action steps. And I think you too implement that, exemplify that, And I love how, because really at the end of the day, how we thrive really involves serving and being of contribution to others. And you're doing just that. And I really admire you. However I can help, let's stay in touch, you two. I've really enjoyed you being on the show. I think this will really connect with a lot of people, and I will keep putting this out as many times over as necessary. I really adore you both.
Thank you. We appreciate you and what you're doing, helping people. You're making a big difference, and we're grateful for you.
Let's stay in touch, friends.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. All the best, risers and thrivers. We will see you next week. We've got another recording at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, January 24th, with Kevin Brooks from Wiggle Your Toes, who will talk all about the lifelong ramifications of choosing to drink and drive. It'll be a great show. Join us there. All the best, everyone. Rise and thrive.